Hello and welcome to Open Timelines. I'm your host, Sebastian Martin, and today with us we have Carolyn Green, a PhD dealing with holotropic breathworks. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So Carolyn, could you please tell us about your academic background to start with?
Right. Well, I started off quite a while back with a more conventional mainstream career, but still very much oriented in health. So I started off as a physiotherapist or physical therapist, and I practiced that early in my career. I very quickly got kind of pulled into international health work. It kind of combined an interest with other cultures and travel. So I was a Canadian volunteer, a QSO, which is like the American Peace Corps. I was in Africa in my 20s, and then for about a 10-year period, I would go back and forth between Canada and a lot of third world or non-industrialized countries. So I worked in Africa, the Caribbean, and in Asia, in China, and one of my favorite postings was in Kathmandu, Nepal. So there I was I was working in a training program, training assistant physiotherapists. So at that time, I would say, as relevant to holotropic breathwork, I got a little bit, I saw another side of health and healthcare, exposure to a lot of different health beliefs and indigenous practices, I guess as we'd call them. And so it knocked me out of my Western world viewpoint. And when I came back, the last time I came back, I'd been about 4 years in Asia. And so I kind of, as a entry back into Canadian healthcare, as well as practicing back in hospital-based physiotherapy practice, I started a master's in healthcare and epidemiology, so I trained in that. And then I migrated to the university. I kind of, at that point, was very much, I was somewhat burnt out, actually, from my own experiences, being in third world and culture shock going back and forth. So I was in a university setting for about 10 years doing academic research, and became a research coordinator there for health technology assessment. So I was still involved with health and technologies and different ways of assessing and looking at things. But that's when I personally became involved with holotropic breathwork and found it very useful for myself for really some of my own personal healing from my life and my world experiences, yeah.
So currently you have a PhD in what field exactly? So
I actually certified in holotropic breathwork before I went back and did a PhD in health information science. So I have these two very different streams. One's very mainstream and knowledge translation. I do drug safety research for a university-based group. And so we're like medical watchdogs. So we have a critical approach. A lot of it is looking at the marketing of pharmaceutical drugs and products and saying, are they as good as they're being promoted?
Right.
So it's kind of getting a balanced view of that scientific literature. Yeah.
So in 1993, you had your first holotropic breathwork journey.
Yes.
Can you please describe what attracted you to this field in the first place?
Well, I had this natural interest in health, but my own symptomatology at the time, I felt some tightness of breath. It was just like when I tried to take a deep breath, I felt restricted, and I didn't have any way to work with it. It wasn't like an exercise thing I could work with, and I just happened. Ingrid Pacey, who is a very big name in the province, she's a psychiatrist. She's trained in holotropic breathwork. She's been involved with the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Sciences, and she's been involved in studies. She's been involved in some of their trials. But it was just a friend of mine had consulted with her and was invited to this workshop, almost like as one of her patients. She'd had nightmares, and Ingrid Pacey thought that the workshop could be helpful in kind of seeing what the basis of that was. And so she invited me. I was all set to go with her because I had this restricted breathing and I was curious. And so I walked through that door, but my friend chickened out and she didn't go. And she never really got any personal benefit for herself. And she was always, we've kind of lost track of each other over the last, 25 years or more. But, she was always kind of looking at me like, what happened to you? It was the road that she didn't take.
So Carolyn, in France, I believe in the 1990s, they considered holotropic breathwork as a cult. Could you tell us why this will not be the case?
Why it's not a cult? Well, I mean, certainly, I think France had maybe a problem with real cults. And so it might have appeared from the outside with not, enough information that there was somebody like Stan Grof, who is certainly an important figure, and a group of people who are following a different type of practice, very strange, using non-ordinary states for healing. So that must have looked strange to people in more of a mainstream mindset. And it is a whole paradigm shift. However, it doesn't really meet the criteria for a cult in that people are turning away from their own interests and their own lives to serve a master or to blindly follow a teacher. And certainly Stan is not somebody who wants you to blindly follow him at all. There's a shelf of books that he's written or been involved in writing. He's interested in designing psychology that incorporates many different states of consciousness and spiritual practices and spiritual emergency. So he's trying to broaden the mainstream approach really to how we think about consciousness and also mental health and holistic health. That's what he's up to. He's certainly not up to getting a group of people to follow him and turn away from their the concerns of their life. I mean, this is really about having a non-ordinary experience and aligning yourself with a deeper wisdom that you hold within, that you don't have to reference somebody, on the outside. You don't have to follow someone's teachings. You're aligning with, your interior GPS kind of system, so that you can live more fully, that you can live more simply, fully, happily. That's what the real objectives are, and that's really what most people's experience is, that it is a real transformative experience, and that there's many benefits that flow out of having done holotropic breathwork that are kind of like not as simple as maybe taking your stiff shoulder into a practitioner and having it moving, again. But they're kind of usually multi-layered experiences that guided by an inner direction will kind of focus the experience on what's personal to the individual, how they need to move to wholeness. It can be very different for every different person. So
my research shows that holotropic breathwork is a mix of science and mysticisms, but you told me that there was kind of a split between science and mysticisms, and Grof tried to remove mysticisms from the technique. Can you...
Well, mysticism, I mean, I think what Grof was really looking for, because he was at the forefront of the psychedelic medicine movement. He thought it was going to transform psychiatry and medicine because he'd seen the amazing healing that was going on. So when he couldn't do that, he was like, how can I do this naturally? He found that breath was the closest he could get without using something that was illegal. And everybody had a big spotlight on Stan, that they were going to try to find him, like Timothy Leary, doing something illegal and put him in jail. So he wasn't going there, but breath was perfectly legal, and he was getting results along the same line within the same paradigm, and so on. But he also wanted to make it accessible to any reasonably healthy person, you know, not somebody who's really has very, very bad, serious mental health, you know, problems, but anyone from any culture, any place in the world. So he didn't want to have it aligned with yoga or North American shamanic practices or Peruvian shamanic practices or Sufism or anything. If you take out the culture and some of those mystic traditions, you just get back to very simple principles: breath, inner healer, whatever you want to call it, you know, and inner healing intelligence, and allow that experience guided from the inside out to be the guide, not, and certainly people would say that the experiences that arise often have a very mystical or numinous or spiritual dimension to them, and that's one category of the experiences. Some people would like have a purely physical energy. It doesn't have any any kind of, by mysticism, I'm really thinking you're bringing in a spiritual dimension, that you're connecting you to something larger than yourself. And some people's experiences could purely have to do with something that happened during their life, and that they're, you know, if they were bullied or had an accident or something, and there's still undigested material in their psyche that they need to re-experience and re-feel, it's not going outside of the experience of their life. And the person right next to them could be having a very mystical experience, like they're identifying with Christ consciousness or dancing with Shiva, you know. It's that's the kind of thing that can arise in a session. It's not directed by any external facilitator. That's just what's arising. Yeah.
So do you keep track through the association of, you know, anybody's experience to know if they fit within a specific category, if it's to do with mysticisms or trauma or anything else?
Yeah, this is really interesting. So Stan has done that extensively his whole life. Like, he started off with, he had over 2,000 cases cataloged or whatever, and he is a scientist. He's a taxonomist. He says, he listens to the experience and he says, okay, this is in this category. You've had a mystical type of experience. And here it's just been a physical, you know, just energy flowing. This has been like, there's a whole category of people who've had experiences of being like a dolphin or a whale consciousness or a butterfly, you know, like, and so he would be carefully making this map. So he's got a whole book, like the Holotropic Mind, that's just categorizing all these experiences, all very different, and he still does that as part of the training within really the Graph transpersonal training. They're still looking and sifting through the experiences that are arising. But I think that map has pretty much been made and has been mapped out. And so in my practice and in my own personal experience, I haven't found a lot of new things to go on the map. In fact, the map is pretty solid, and you know, you might have a unique flavor to your experience, but it's very likely within a category that's on this Stan's expanded cartography of the psyche.
When you think about rising your, or actually expanding your awareness to reach a higher level of consciousness, some countries, especially the ones who live in poverty and wars, would not have necessarily the same level of awareness compared to countries like Canada or the US, who are not really involved in those battles. So eventually the experiences will be very different, and therefore the percentages would be quite, you know, significantly, you know, broad and different. So that's the reason why, in my opinion, the awareness, in any case, to raise your awareness to do with consciousness, would be easier for people who live in stable, peaceful countries, we might be able to offset the majority of the people who are not. So that's the way I can see it.
I think Stan would agree, who's thought about this, like he's spent 60 years thinking about this. I think he'd agree. I think he would say in some ways, you see, our psyches aren't really so sealed off from the global consciousness, so it's like by raising our consciousness, sometimes people really feel like they're doing someone else's work, or they're doing the work of the world, whatever. So, I think that's true, that we're all, at some level, we're all connected to the web of life. So anything that kind of lifts, that aligns us with source energy and lifts the burden of suffering can have wide-ranging impacts, even that we can't measure with our technologies.
Which is what Buddhist monks do as well, trying to meditate for the world, right?
Yeah,
and
that kind of
so
idea.
Whatever energy that we can transcend through the universe can be felt by many people.
Right. And it seemed then back in time, right?
Yes.
Like people have the experience of like going up through their ancestral tree and then healing things or experiencing things that happened centuries ago. And then they're somehow, processing that and clearing it from the collective unconscious. So
it is my understanding that for the holotropic breathwork, that it is recommended to check with your doctor if you have any kind of cardiovascular issues, or even for pregnant women to consult with the doctors before doing the practices. Can you explain why?
Right, because it can be very intense. Like you wouldn't, not everyone, this isn't the right approach for everyone, because sometimes it can be very intense, physically and emotionally. Sometimes not at all. Sometimes somebody can be totally relaxed and they're no struggle and no, it's not physically taxing. So, but we go through a medical waiver just so everybody's really informed. And certainly if you had something like high blood pressure, but you were on a blood pressure medication and then you didn't have high blood pressure at the time and you had your doctor's okay, it's totally fine. So many people who have chronic conditions, things like asthma, that they might have their inhaler at hand or back off a little bit at some point. So we always, the first thing is there is an important physical plane that we're living on here and we're working on here. So we don't want to do anything that's going to put a pregnancy at risk or to put anyone's physical body and even psyche, we're not, above all, do no harm. So that's why there's a screening process at the beginning. And some things are borderline. Some things are just no. I mean, if you've had a retinal detachment, that's not something that is wise to do holotropic breath work, because it's going to could affect the position, pressure of it's just not worth it. So there's other things that you can do. So, and it is, part of it's like physical, the strain on the physical body, but part of it, if you have a serious challenge with your mental health, then certainly it's not the container for doing that kind of work. If somebody's really suffering a lot, then being at a workshop for one day, at the end when it's, you kind of open up and start getting into something and then it's over and you don't have that follow-up support, that's not wise. So sometimes people who are at the border, if they have the support of people around them and their doctor's permission or their caregiver's kind of permission, that's a very different scenario than somebody just walking in the door.
I have read that holotropic breathwork can potentially cause PTSD, so post-traumatic syndrome disorder, and because you are hyperventilating for 45 minutes, it could potentially prevent the oxygen to get to the brain and cause certain issues with people who would be susceptible to suggestions with the practitioner. And what would be your comments on that?
No, I think we post-traumatic stress disorder is something that probably needs a bigger container. But many of the things from our personal, biographies that could have, there's degrees of post-traumatic stress disorder. We all have different wounds, and certainly, there's a difference between, spending how many years in Iraq and coming back and having nothing that can help. Even in the drugs, there's certainly psychedelic medicines has been aimed in doing the research in that level of post-traumatic stress disorder. So it's in the same paradigm, right? This is like the psychedelic medicine that doesn't use a chemical. Mm-hmm. So the bigger containers that are using drugs are actually not causing post-traumatic stress disorder. The research is pretty clear that it can be helpful in a way that our mainstream approaches haven't been. So I'm not really inviting people into the one-day workshop, container, and nor is the regular model, because it's realized that it just needs to be a bigger container than that. But what the suggestion is, like, if something comes up in therapy, in holotropic breathwork, are you going to be re-traumatized by that memory coming up or that experience being activated? And I think, that's a very valid concern, and of course Rolf has had his eye on this all along, but it's not what happens. The opposite happens. If things that come up to be healed can be healed, and you're moving towards the healing. If something comes up, like it can be something completely forgotten. Let's say an accident that you've put behind you. In my case, I was actually in a war zone when part of my international work and travels, and I was years doing holotropic breathwork before that scary incident that would probably come under post-traumatic stress, would probably qualify if I wanted to. I'd never been diagnosed with that, but when that came up in my own personal breathwork journey, it was very intense. And what breathwork does, it allows you to digest something in your personal history that you didn't have time to digest at the time. And so when it arises, the safety in doing the work is in opening, really feeling it, really expressing it, really releasing it and getting support to it until it comes to a natural conclusion. It wouldn't be safe, and I think in some inexperienced facilitation, for example, you could have somebody activating something, and then if it's not allowed to be released, then you've activated something and you're stuck with it, right? It's active in your psyche. And then you're going to be behaving with that filter of, I'm in a traumatic situation. Yeah.
So I've read that the holotropic breathwork could be somehow confused with body work. And could you explain to us how, what is the focused energy release work?
Right. Yes, totally. This is like with everything, with Stan and holotropic breathwork, it's like the opposite. So if you're doing body work, often you're using your energy and putting it into the patient, whoever you're working with. Mm-hmm. This one, the focused body work is only really used if there's something that is still blocked or incomplete in a session. So many things in something could arise, like the body holds memory, holds trauma, everything. So if something arises, a pressure in the body, often it just arises, you really feel it, you express something, it relaxes, and the facilitator does nothing. And that's perfect. It's like natural childbirth, Mm-hmm. You don't want to have a big interventionist birth unless it's necessary, right?
Right.
Yeah, you don't want to over facilitate. But sometimes if there is, it's not completely releasing, or it's not it's arisen as a natural part of the session, but it's not coming to its natural conclusion, then you would be helping the person to push it from the inside out. So they're pushing against your hand from the center of whatever that tension is. Like, I don't know, in let's say a hip, had that was the favorite spot in this body to hold the memory of the weight of the world or something like that they've borne in their life, then you would really get the person to, if there's still any tension in the body, to push out into your hands. And it's in non-ordinary states, it's really very effective to release that way. And so we don't, in the holotropic tradition, we're very careful not to come in with any other healing approaches over top of a non-ordinary state. We're allowing it to take its natural course. So because it's the bigger danger is actually pulling someone out of their process, right? They get to something that's reaching its natural conclusion, and if you come in and start doing body work or Reiki or acupressure or mantras or anything like that, it actually tends to pull the person out of the natural trajectory, and it actually makes it more unsafe because they're not going to completely release whatever they've activated, right? You activate and let it run its course. So after you finish a session, then all the healing approaches are beautiful. It could be, if it's been a very energetic or physical kind of thing, all kinds of other energetic and massage and hydrotherapy, almost anything works alongside holotropic breathwork. But we really separate them from what we do in the session and what happens outside the session.
That's very interesting because I have a friend who just recently went to Brazil and was in a shamanic retreat, and he was involved in holotropic breathwork within the retreat.
Right.
Would you say that the holotropic breathwork would be complementary to potentially induce out-of-body experiences?
Yes, well, I mean, it does, actually. One of the non-ordinary experiences you can have is like an out-of-body type of thing. That is not like that unusual or scary within the holotropic paradigm. I think some people find that quite fun, and people find their way back. But with what people are going to Peru or Brazil, wherever, to combine, to have non-ordinary experiences, usually with some spirit plant medicines. And some of those retreat settings are using breathwork as well. They might not be with people who are fully trained. And, I think there's a real mix of skill amongst the shamans as well. I think some are really great and really legitimate and so on, and some are maybe not so good. But I say that it can be used before using some kind of entheogen. It can be used instead of. So for example, I haven't been someone who's felt it necessary to alter my consciousness at all by any other means for like over 25 years, like nothing, no alcohol, no nothing. I don't need it, and I do breath work. And so that's my drug of choice or whatever. Right. Now this is my healing path, my spiritual path. And so I would say, consider really, if you're, this is like a psychedelic medicine for people who don't do drugs. And also people who do drugs, or who do spirit plant medicines, or who do ayahuasca, or any of the others. It's also really good for integration because it's not quite as strong.
It could be quite scary though you can understand for the people who want to go to a shamanic retreat. They are used to this, they want to get that kind of experience, but some people who want to go through the holotropic breathwork may not be used to such experience or even out-of-body experiences. Exactly. So it could be quite scary.
Right.
Is it something that you warn the people ahead of time before they come in, or how does
Warn,
it work?
and I think it's informed, you know. So we always, part of the safety of the holotropic approach is always letting people know the types of experiences that can happen, how you work with them, how it's safe, how we support them, and then, you know, it's often it's the unknown and just before this, the scarier part. Even if you are in a session and you're, you know, you go into a non-ordinary state and you're really, you know, come up against one of your wounds, you know, psychological wounds. In the midst of that kind of healing and expression and movement, it's like less painful than what a lot of people are carrying around every day.
So Carolyn, can you explain to the viewers how a person, a breather, is supposed to be experiencing the holotropic breathwork? What are the steps? How do they first, you know, meet the practitioner, and then what happens?
Yeah, so just let me walk you through it. So we give people an introduction at the beginning so they know what experiences they can encounter, because if you know something can come up, if it doesn't surprise you, it's you don't want anybody to freak out and not realize what's possible in this work. And then there's you know, we explain the how-tos and how it was developed out of Stan Grof's research. And then in the workshop, we set the container, you know, we have an opening circle where people will just get to know each other, and we become a tribe for the day. And then after a very short introduction, then people divide off into breather sitter pairs, and then they switch places. So the first each session lasts about 3 hours, and that is not a mandatory 3 hours. This means you have like up to 3 hours. So we have like a 3-hour music set. So we get people going with you know, a little lead in to start the breathing. Now the breathing is really not as technical as some types of breathing like pranayamas and so on. It's not hyperventilation. Hyperventilation people do when they're panicked, and it's usually short and shallow, and you know, so this is deep, continuous, and full, and the instructions are really to breathe until something surprises you. Now, some people breathe like athletes. It's like they've just run the, you know, 500, and that's a perfect kind of way to breathe for them. Some people breathe like yogis, and they're very deep, you know, the diaphragm is pumping up and down. Some people come into workshops that their breathing is like very constricted just because that's what's going on with them physically. So it's just as anyone who breathes more deeply, quickly, continuously, mouth, nose, no particular sophistication, if they keep on doing that, particularly at the beginning of the workshop, they will go into a non-ordinary state. It's actually a chemical shift that happens that changes their blood chemistry, brain chemistry. It tends to hyperoxygenate rather than deprive, you know, of oxygen. And sometimes it really doesn't depend on the chemistry as much as the psychological openness. Like I breathe very little before I go into a non-ordinary state, actually.
So does the person stays in the dark room?
So we're lying on our backs and with a mask on, just to keep the attention inward. You bring a mat, your own pillow, your own nice comforter or something, and you have somebody sitting beside you that can help you with, some people have to go to the bathroom often because there's like a detox effect that goes on. But you know, you have your water, Kleenexes, a bag. You know, you don't want to eat too much beforehand. Some people do find it affects their stomach. Anyway, you have Kleenexes, whatever. And the music is concert loud. It's not, you can use earplugs if you have very sensitive ears, but people in non-ordinary states don't find it as loud as people in ordinary states. And it really helps to cover the weird sounds of breathing for some people. Don't like to hear breathing and don't like, or might feel self-conscious if they're making any sounds like that. So it's fairly loud, and at that point you're really your attention is on the inside, and keep your attention inside, focused on the music and that until something really surprises you.
So Are you close to people? Are you in the
Yeah,
same room?
you have a sitter beside you. You're in the same room. Usually, it's people are kind of spread out in a circle. Like maybe it would look like a yoga studio with a lot of mats around, but you want thicker mats and you want more covers. So everybody has like a little breathing cocoon going on there, and then the people who aren't doing the breathing at that moment, they're part of the container. And it's like we're usually very hypervigilant of our environment, and that container really allows us to just completely go on an inner journey without worrying about our space, our personal space. Somebody else is attending to that for us, and so it's really an important part of the process. And the thing is, we all start off together. The people who are breathing start off together, but they don't finish together because everybody has their own unique trajectory of their experience. And usually, once you've really shifted into a non-ordinary state, that can happen in, almost immediately, or it can take half an hour, or some people even longer. Then you're kind of in a non-ordinary state and things are happening much more subtly than if you were using an actual drug, usually. Some people are very visual or, but a lot of times, I just tell people that the experiences are not like the Technicolor 60s poster of a psychedelic experience, right? And then you kind of go out and have the experience, and you can really have the safety to express yourself physically or vocally or cry or yell, or that's part of the setting that we're creating. And there's not really too many places. Most people have that freedom to completely express whatever is arising in the moment. And then at some point people really feel like they're done. It might be around the 2-hour mark, but some people, it might be at the 3-hour mark.
So could it be destructive to people who are in the same room, and all of a sudden a person decides to leave, a person decides to talk? How can that be prevented?
Well, we're all agreeing to kind of stay. It isn't safe to breathe yourself into an experience and then try to stop it. So that's the part of the agreement at the beginning, is that the way out is through, right? If you just think of somebody breathing themselves into a place where they've really, touched their primordial rage or whatever, right? Their primal rage. If they decide, I'm out of here, then they're leaving with that rage activated. So that's not safe. So we would have a way, if they felt that they needed to leave, we would have a conversation about that. We're not going to physically restrain somebody, but but the thing is, the safety is just allowing it to get the experience to get as big or go wherever it goes, and then let it kind of come back down. And then to come back to earth, we do mandala drawings, we have food to ground, people switch places, and another closing circle, and that's the end of the day.
Now, would you be able to say to the people who are not used to holotropic breath work, or maybe apprehensive, fearful of the experience, what would you say to them?
Well, I would say this is a matter of like you connecting with your authentic self, with the power within, with aligning with what's in, and things that might come up from the inside that are scary are just coming up to leave. And it's much better. You're going to feel much better if something scary comes up and it's on its, and it leaves and it's on its way out. That's been my experience. And it's not really very bleeding edge. So this is like, it's been 30, 40 years, is a very formal process all over the world. People have been doing it. Many psychiatrists like Ingrid Pacey have trained in it. So it's got experience and a lot of science behind it. So nothing to fear.
So Carolyn, if people want to reach out to you and find out what you do, what is the best way to reach you and see your work? So
I have a website, thesecretofbreath.com. And so there you can see the workshop schedule. I have fairly regular workshops, and I also offer individual sessions, which is Sometimes if people can't make it to we always kind of recommend the full workshop approach as being ideal.
Okay.
And sometimes if people that's not working into their lifestyle, we can do individual sessions as well.
Great, thank you. Well, it was a pleasure
Thank
to meet you, Carolyn. Thank you so much. And this was Sebastian Martin, your host for Open Timeline, and see you next time.